What is a go for no moment? Well, it's any time where you suddenly find yourself with this opportunity. And it's this opportunity to approach, make an ask, to put yourself out there. It's also that moment where we most often talk ourselves out of it.
Welcome to the Sales Review Podcast. Today's guests are folks who've changed the way millions of people think about failure. Richard, Fenton, and Andrea Waltz are the co-authors of the best-selling book Go for No, a book that has become a cornerstone for sales professionals, entrepreneurs, and anyone who's ever wrestled with the fear of rejection. You can see it right here. With its bold premise that yes is the destination, but no is how you get there, Andrea and Richard helped launch a movement that flipped the script on success. And now they're back with a powerful new follow-up, Go for No, the sequel. This book picks up where the original left off, only now the story dives deeper. It's not just about hearing no anymore. It's about legacy, mentorship, and redefining what success really means over time. Andrea and Richard, welcome to the Sales Review Podcast.
Hey, Jeb, great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm really excited about this. I love this book, and I love it for a lot of reasons. I think it's what I didn't realize when I read it when I was 20 years old was that it was a roadmap for success at an early stage of my career. I read Jeb's books, I've got Anthony's books, I've got all these different sales books, and they sort of speak to somebody in their mid 30s who's really gotten into a sales career and they're trying to level up what they're doing. But your book really helped me uncover fanatical prospecting in a different way than I think I would have if I hadn't had your book. And now you've got a sequel. And I want to start with kind of the obvious question, which is why a sequel and why now? Because the original Go for No became a cult classic in the sales world. It's really an impressive. It's thin. It's only a few hundred pages. It's really, really cool that you did such an amazing job with the book that you have. And what made you want to revisit this and tell a new story that builds on top of it?
Okay, Jeb, this is going to sound weird, and I'm not trying to equate us with the Star Wars franchise. However, if you have Star Wars, it does kind of make sense that you have Empire Strikes Back, right? And then I guess this means we have to have Return of the Jedi. But so this is our Empire Strikes Back, which some say is even better than the first movie.
Mm.
We really wanted to dig into the concepts further. All these years talking to people about Go for No and then getting all of the feedback. It's kind of like, wow, that's a cool angle. And how would what things do we really want to expand on? And it's kind of funny that you would bring up you reading Go for No at 20, because in the sequel, what we deal with is our main character comes back 25 years later. He has a daughter who's just graduated college. She thinks sales is sleazy, but she's lost. She doesn't know what to do. And so he throws her into sales because, hey, it's the best thing that you can get into anyway. It's a life skill that you must have.
Mm.
And so it just allowed us to go into some corners and angles of Go for No that we wouldn't have previously. And I'll just add this. The other frustrating thing is I'm still thinking of things I wish that I would have put in this book. I'm like, I had an epiphany this morning. I'm like, darn it all. I should have put in that in the book. So it never ends when you're teaching this concept. And I think sales is an ongoing education. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons. What do you have? What do you have, Dan?
Well, we wrote the original Go for No in 1999. We published it in 2000. We had a quote publishing deal with a major New York publisher that fell apart at the last minute because they said that Go for No would never sell more than 5,000 copies. And we had a decision to make. And the answer was, do we just say, okay, the book's no good, we were wrong? Or do we take on the responsibility of learning the publishing game as well as the writing game? And we decided that we were going to learn to publish books. Now, keep in mind, this was before Amazon. This was before print on demand. This was before you could easily hire a graphic artist. Everything was expensive. So it was like literally like learning a second industry. And, we made the decision to do it. We made the decision that we were going to publish a book ourselves. And we made the decision that we were going to prove the very large New York publisher whose name I won't mention, and I won't mention it. I don't want to get sued.
Does it
Um,
rhyme with anything? I
it's
can't.
let's see, um, Byman and Rooster, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and so we set about trying to to make that book a success. And just a couple of years ago, we passed the 1 million sales mark. And so they were off only by, I don't know, not 1,000%, way more than that, 10,000% off. We came to the conclusion that there's a lot of decent sales training companies out there. There are some exceptional ones like yours, like Sales Gravy, but we hadn't seen anybody do as deep a dive on the concept of rejection
Mm.
as we wanted to go. It gets mentioned by a lot of sales training companies where they say, and you're going to have to face failure rejection. You're going to have to keep going. They go like, okay, next topic. Now you guys do a better job than almost anybody that we've seen out there. It's one of the reasons why we have such a great relationship. But we just said, let's just take the one topic that is the thing that if you can't conquer this,
Mm.
if you can't get over your fear of failure and rejection, then all of the techniques in the world are not going to help you if you don't pick up the phone, right? If you don't pick up the phone, if you don't dial, if you don't get people in the pipeline, then it doesn't matter. So that was really kind of our intent from the very beginning.
I think it's really important that we note that the Go for No philosophy that you have been teaching for since 2000. I'm not since 2000, but you published the book
Yeah.
in 2025 years. I can't. 2010 years ago. It doesn't feel like that, but you've been teaching it for so long. There's so many stories that you must hear. And Andrea, you alluded to this, that you've been teaching it and you hear all these things and you're probably just, having dinner and you go, oh my God, that was a great story. Why didn't I have that? Because rejection is so human. It's not a sales specific emotion. We all know what rejection feels like, even if you haven't been in sales, and you tackle it in a really interesting way. So like the first book gave us Eric Bratton, who is sort of an accidental student with this new mindset. But in the sequel, you talked about 25 years later, he brings his daughter Cassidy back into the mix. What was that? What does that shift represent to you? And how does that expand on the core message of Go for No? And give people a quick core message of Go for No in your words, and then I'll re-ask the questions if we need to.
Gotcha. No. I'm good. I'm good. But thank you. That was good context. So, yeah, we do need to frame up Go for No. What does Go for No even mean? Because on the surface, it sounds like a horrible strategy, right? For anyone in sales, just on the surface. What we really mean is to intentionally increase your failure rate. And by that, we mean to intentionally put yourself in positions where you're willing to hear no more often, understanding that when you do that, that's where the yeses are. And this is why our subtitle is Yes is the destination, but No is how you get there. And it all stems from a sales situation that Richard had when he was selling suits for a living and learned that by not being willing to hear no and show the customer more products, more services, he was actually limiting his potential and limited his sale.
Mm.
And his mentor, his district manager, kind of called him out and said, "What did that customer say no to?" And Richard had to say nothing. Everything I laid in front of that guy, he purchased. And then the question was, then how did you know he was done? Because Richard had never heard the word no
Mm.
in that sales interaction. And if you're not hearing the word no, then truly you probably aren't maximizing that interaction, that sale, even if it's later on to something else, referrals, reviews, whatever. So that is kind of the context. What we did with Cassidy was it gave us a chance to dig into what people's perceived self-imposed limitations are. So we have Cassidy, she says to her dad, I don't want to sell it sleazy. He's like, it's not sleazy. We talk about that in the book. So finally she begrudgingly is okay, I'm going to try it and realizes how difficult it is and realizes not only is it just objectively difficult to get a hold of people, she's experiencing all of these challenges,
Mm.
but then she realizes she herself has all of these self-imposed limitations. So she decides to go through and make a list of all of them. And we kind of flesh out 6 of them, probably the most common of them. One of hers is that she feels like she's too young and doesn't really have a right to talk to people. Some people feel that. Some people feel they're too old, right? Whatever your like kind of baggage is, whatever the thing that you feel like you're carrying around, that's going to, of course, be your limitation. Um, she feels like she's going to be pushy, aggressive. So it gave us a chance to dig into the limitations more than we did on the first book. And I think that was a real benefit of this
Yeah.
so that we could kind of dismantle those and then also show people a different way of looking at them. Really, it's not so much, Jeb, that you can get rid of those. Like, how do you get rid of these beliefs and these thoughts that you have had for so long? So we're not gonna try to dump them out necessarily. We just wanna start adding good stuff in, and that's a big theme of the book.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Richard, I'd love to hear your take on this and the shift that you feel like Cassidy represents from the first book and into this new generation of sellers.
Well, that's a great question, and I will tell you, it's going to be a little embarrassing for Andrea and I because we like to think we're on top of everything, but in this particular case, we were very slow learners. We started, we started out with a very simple premise, and that is if you hear no more often, good things happen, right? And that rejection isn't something to be avoided; it's something that you should seek, right? That no isn't bad, no is good.
Mm.
Well, we wrote the book, we started doing training, we traveled the world, delivering this message. And it became very obvious that there were two groups of people in every audience that we spoke to. The first group were the people who would come up and say, wow, that was really great. I never really thought of rejection that way. I'm going to go out and increase my nose. And they would just go out and they would do it.
Hmm.
Then there was the second group who would say, wow, that was amazing. I never really thought of no that way. I'm going to go out and increase my nose. But they didn't.
Mm.
They couldn't. They had something that was standing between them and putting the really basic concept, right, in action. And so, for a long time, shame on us, we kind of said, hey, 20% of every audience we speak to, they go out and they get great results. And the companies we would work for, they'd say, wow, you're not going to believe it. We got a 50% improvement from 20% of our people. Thank you. But it started to wear on us
Mm.
that there was this huge body of people, 80% of every audience who loved our message, but couldn't apply it. And that was probably a disservice on our part. So your question was, what was the motivation for writing this book? Well, it was really to acknowledge the idea that, in the first book, Eric is he's that first category. He doesn't realize that no is good. He learns the lesson and then he goes out and applies it and becomes an immediate success. Now, you're 20 years later, he's got his daughter, Cassidy, and she doesn't have the same capabilities that he had. She's got hangups. It's, understanding it logically,
Mm.
understanding that, hey, if I increase my failure rate, I'll increase my success. That's one thing. Being able to do it emotionally, to be able to not take it personally, right? That's a whole different thing. So we said, listen, with this book, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room here is that we have not addressed the other part of the problem. And that is that people think sales is sleazy. They think they're too young. They think they're too old. They don't think they have the right to do it. They think it's manipulative. They've got all of these hangups. And we said, listen, we need to address that. And at the very final, core of that whole thing is that the majority of people in sales have a mental hang up where they keep saying to themselves, I can't do this.
Mm.
I'm never going to be great at this. I'll never get it. No matter how hard I try, it looks like the top people always win the awards, and I'm always sitting in the back of the room clapping for them. And they keep telling themselves that they can't do it. And we thought, well, what if you just actually started telling yourself that you can? What if you can get away from this idea that I can never be successful in sales and really just start saying, I can do this. I can make this happen. And at the last thing I'll say is that at the core of this whole thing is a little chapter we heard in a book. I read this in a book 30 years ago by a guy named Steve Chandler, and he's a coach. And one of his clients comes to him and he says, and the client says, I don't think I could ever do that. And then he utters the words. He says, then don't be you. And when I heard that, I thought, A, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And B, I thought that is the most profound thing I've ever heard. If you aren't good at something, and people will tell you all the time, like, I can't speak in front of 1,000 people, right? And then the advice I get is, well, just be natural. Just be yourself. Be yourself. The person just said, I can't do it. So you're telling them to go ahead and be the person who can't do it? No, the correct message is, well, then don't be you. Be someone who can stand in front of a room of 1,000 people. Be somebody who can pick up the phone, right, and make the call. Be somebody who can ask a closing question. Start being someone who can instead of thinking of yourself as someone who can't. That is the main thrust of the second book.
It really resonated with me, and I straddle these two lines. I mean, I grew up in sales. I had the respect for sales my entire life, and then I had the disrespect for sales when I was in my early 20s because I didn't want to be like my father, and then I came back to sales, so I figured it all out, right? But for me, it spoke to me, and I have always been a person that understood and intellectually understood no risk, no reward. Go for no. If you don't have no's, you don't have yeses. That whole concept never missed me. It always made sense. And when I read your book when I was in my early 20s, the entire time reading this book, of course. I mean, these are blinding truths. These are flashes of the obvious that you were writing about. And the second book was the same way. These are flashes of the obvious, but I love the second book because I more often than not find myself in that second camp where yes, you can always go out and just try things and it makes sense to just go do it. But if you have hangups, and you alluded to this in the more things that you cover, Andrea, in this book, and it made sense for people. If you're listening to this, you want to read this book, there are hangups that you have that are not necessarily a fault of yours or a breakdown of your personhood. They're human emotions and human feelings and human consequences to environments and things that you are in. And when you are understanding go for no, but you're having a hard time implementing it, one thing that I've always found that top performers do is they have an alter ego. When I go up on stage and I'm a 27-year-old kid and I have an international keynote to go do, I am not Jeb Jr. is not ready for that. But I just channel somebody else. I tell people all the time, you were great on stage. I black out. I have no idea what happened on stage. I just went out there and then I guess something happened and I came back in. But that's that person that I'm not. And cold calling's a lot like that. Sometimes I have to psych myself up and go, you're cold calling or prospecting, anything. You go, I got to put myself out there and I feel really uncomfortable doing this. Well, don't be you. I'm JBJ. Be JBJ. Don't be Jeb Blount Jr. Don't be yourself. Be somebody else. And I love that message. And I think that I noticed that when you alluded to this earlier, that this book was not just about sales anymore. It's more personal and it has more tactile feel to it. There are themes around self-worth, expectations, navigating setbacks, and this is all at different stages of life. It sounds like that was intentional, but kind of expand on that intention of helping people implement the other 80%, helping them take your message and actually start using it, and not just leaving the 20% to go do their work, and 80% hoping that one day they can get there.
So Cassidy gets thrown into a situation where she sees an opportunity. And this is another, I think, beyond the don't be you theme. And it's so funny that you'd also bring up the alter ego, because we created a bonus program to go with this book. And that is exactly what we dig
I know that, Andrea.
deep into it.
I did my research.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
so good.
That
You're
was
so
on
good.
purpose.
Yes, and it's called Don't Be You.
That's right.
That's the program.
And so that's part of it. But Cassidy sees this opportunity, and this was another thing that I think we touched on in the first book, but it's going after something big, and it's looking for those big opportunities where we normally shut ourselves down and just say, well, no, I don't deserve to do that. I shouldn't do that. It's too big. It's too scary, whatever. And because of what she's gone through, this kind of transformation, which, by the way, we have to make happen really fast in we've got this little story. We've got just a little bit of real estate. So even as you read it, I'm wondering, like, did we take enough time? But
It's fast and furious, but I
Yeah.
think what it delivers is that the point lands. So you land the plane beautifully. So I will say that after reading the book, it was fast and furious, her transformation, but the plane lands and the message made sense. You did an incredible job with this. So Just some if people go in to read this, like it is fast, but it is impactful. It really was a shift in my mind and how I thought about things. So I really did appreciate how you brought her story to the forefront.
That's awesome. Thank you. And the plane literally lands, by the way, without giving away any part
Yeah.
of the plot.
So,
It literally lands. So, and that was a big message. One of the things that when we speak, and this is kind of I guess, a look into the secret sauce of our process. We both tell two stories when we speak. Richard tells a story about oh, it's funny, I blanked out. Oh, about his dad and
Hmm.
when he first started to learn to sell, and his dad basically called him in and is like, "Hey, you're a salesperson now. Like, go down. We've got a phone for you. We've got the yellow pages, which was a big book with names and telephone numbers,
yeah.
which we actually put in this book, which was so ridiculous. And and we've got multi generations, and so this is a story where he tells his dad, "You need to start selling now." And so we kind of used that and integrated it into the book. And then one of the stories that I always tell when we speak is, or a lot of the time, is when we launched our business and we went to this networking event, this mixer, and I saw this woman across the room who was an executive. I read her badge. I literally knew she was a very high powered executive from a company that was like our ideal prospect. And I had this moment of do or die. Should you approach this woman or not? I wanted to approach her, yes. But at the same time, I'm trying to like, I'm just saying to myself, you're not ready. You're going to make a fool out of yourself. And so we were able to integrate in a couple of our stories into the book, and that was a Cassidy moment. That was, and we actually used the term because I was like, we've got to get this term into the book also. Go for no moment, which was something that was not in the first book. And so over the years of teaching this, we've come up with phrases and we've come up with strategies, and one of them is this idea of executing on your go for no moment. So what is a go for no moment? Well, it's any time where you suddenly find yourself with this opportunity, right? And it's this opportunity to approach, make an ask, to put yourself out there. And it's also that moment where we most often talk ourselves out of it, immediately come up
Mm.
with an excuse, right? Knee jerk reaction. Don't do it. Everybody around you is going to hear you're going to look like an idiot or whatever. And so that is one of the things that I loved that we were able to do in this book is showcase some of these things that we've been teaching all of these years that, weren't in the first book.
Right. And I want to compliment Andrea here because she does not get enough accolades. Right.
Oh, you're joking, aren't you?
No, no, no.
Joking.
She really,
Well, we used to joke because what happened, Jeb, is that we joked that I hijacked the Go for No brand because Richard really, I mean, he is my mentor. He taught me this philosophy, and I was like, this is the coolest, most like life-changing, impactful philosophy there is. And you know what? I'm stealing it. I'm taking it as my, like I'm gonna run with this and run this company. And so yeah, so
yeah,
he is kind of joking when he says
yeah, a little
I
bit.
don't get enough
But
accolades.
I do want to give her credit for the story she's telling as the complete context around this is that we had been in business for about 6 months. We were low on money. We had not made a sale yet. And we sold I even think we sold a couple books. Maybe we sold a book or
We
two.
did.
I'm
We
not
sold a
sure.
few books.
Yeah,
You were
but
getting to 5,000 books. You're
yeah,
trying to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there. Yeah.
right,
yeah.
exactly. But we hadn't landed a major client, and so here she is at this conference looking at this high powered executive and with the competing thoughts. Right, I should approach her, and I shouldn't approach her.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she had this go for no moment. She had the opportunity to very easily do what we all do many times, which is just like, it isn't going to work anyway. They're not going to say yes to me. So why bother? But instead, she approached this person, showed the book. The woman flips through the book and says, "Oh, this looks really interesting. Call me on Monday." Right. And so she comes up to me and says, "You're not going to believe this. I met the vice president of, of ABC and, they're interested in the book. and we called them on Monday, and we ended up working with them over 20 times
Wow.
over the course of the next 5 or 6 years. And I have to tell you, had she not taken advantage of the go for no moment, I'm not sure we're doing this interview with you right now, because we might have run out of money. We might have gotten discouraged.
Mm.
Who knows? We might have just gone back to work. We met at Lens Crafters. I'd still be selling eyeglasses. I mean, that's the magic of taking advantage of that moment and understanding that the worst thing that can happen is somebody says no to you and you walk away no poorer than you were before, but you might just walk away richer. And that's a big part of our message in everything we write.
I I want to tell y'all a go for no moment that I had, and I thought of you both specifically before I even lurched into the getting the no. I went, man, go for no would be disappointed if I didn't do this. And we live in Augusta, and we have of course the Masters tournament that comes into town, but we also have the Augusta National Women's Amateur, which many people are becoming aware of, but aren't. It isn't the main spotlight. So it's a week ahead, and it's the amateur women, the best amateur women playing golf, and they are so good. Oh my goodness, they play an amazing game of golf, and it's so much fun to go watch because it's a little bit less attended, but it's headed by several really important people, and one of those people is Miss Condoleezza Rice, who,
Mm.
of course, is a former Secretary of State, first woman. And we might have to fact check this, but first woman with the invitation to be a member at the Augusta National. A very important person and an idol of mine. I had a political science degree. I thought I was going to go be a lawyer. Like, she was just so cool. And she goes to this tournament, and of course, there's famous people at the tournament. But I was sitting on a hole, and she was at the rope with one of her aides, and she was just watching the tournament. And I was with my wife and my daughter, and we were all looking at her. I was almost like bleary eyed, like I couldn't almost see this person. She was so cool,
Mhm.
and we're in this tournament. There's no cameras, there's no phones, there's no reason to not walk up to her and say hello. And I went, the go for no people would say, go talk to her, go talk to her. And I said, Ashley, you should go talk to her. I was trying to push it off on my wife. I said, you should go talk to her. She goes, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I went, I should go talk to her. But then had that moment. Went, I'm just me. I'm just little old me. She doesn't know who I am. She's a former Secretary of State. There's probably Secret Service, and people come up to her all the time and say, "Oh my God, Condoleezza Rice! I can't believe I get to meet you." She probably gets that all the time. She just wants to have a good day. And my approach was, well, I'm just going to go up and act like she's a normal person. And I stood right next to her and I talked to her, and it was a normal conversation about golf. I didn't even go, oh my goodness, you're Condoleezza Rice, my hero. I just started talking to this person, and now because I went and did that, I've been to the tournament a few more times, and she says hello to me every single time she
Mhm.
sees me. We're not friends. I will not claim to be friends with Condoleezza Rice. She might just be being nice to me, but I swear she recognizes me every single time. And that was because I read this book. And when I read the sequel, it encouraged me that was the right decision. You may not walk away richer, but you're certainly not going to walk away any poorer. And I love the way that you put this. And rejection today might be different than it was in 2000 because of technology that we have, but ultimately it doesn't change very much. But the world has changed since the book first came out. In your eyes, how is the fear of no showing up differently in this generation of sellers, entrepreneurs, and leaders versus when you started out in this business?
Okay, I love this question because you're so right. Technology has changed everything, and yet, and I know that that Jeb would agree with this because he talks about the our evolution and not wanting to get thrown out of the tribe and all of that. So our brains haven't changed at all
Mm.
in the last 25 years. I mean, evolution wise, right? It's like
Right.
25 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, rejection was still painful. I've read interesting little tidbits from little papers and pamphlets that were published in like 1906,
Mhm.
and it was, the language was all flowery, and it was like um men men would surely rather go to war than to approach a prospect and have to, whatever, all that kind of flowery formal language. And they were dealing with the exact same thing then. we're dealing with it now. I expect that we'll be dealing with it another 25 years from now. The only difference is now people can hide behind their phones and their computers and all of that,
Mhm.
but the emotions are still the same. And I remember having this epiphany even several years ago. I was at a women's event speaking, and these two young women came up to me. I guess you would call them millennials back then, even, and they were like, "Oh, this was really helpful. So glad you." They said because we will even write emails. We'll write emails to someone, and then it'll be so hard to hit the send button. Like
Mhm.
we just were terrified to hit the send button, and I was thinking, you're terrified to hit the send button. Like, the send button is the easiest, this is the no-brainer thing to me as, a Gen Xer, because to me, the phone is, like, the scary thing.
Mm.
They're not even like, they're not even on the phone. Like, the phone is that's not even happening. So, they're doing the email, they're doing texting and hitting the send.
Mm.
And you can think about it even from a marketing standpoint, hitting publish, turning on your record button, all of these things where we have to be judged by people
Mm.
is terrifying. And so I think that the technology is out there and it's impacting people's behavior. And so they're able to work around and continue to protect themselves.
Mm.
And that is going to be a challenge. And it's going to continue to be a challenge because the brain has still not caught up. And so it's one thing to say, well, I'll just go out and I'll market and I'll post and I'll share things. But what about that moment where you finally do have that actually human conversation? Or and what's gonna happen, Jeb, and I think you probably agree with this is and we're starting to see is live events are becoming really important again now that we all feel pretty comfortable to go back out, and networking is becoming hot. The hot new thing is networking meetings and gatherings and getting people together. And so it's one thing if you can do the marketing and not have to interact with somebody, but eventually you're gonna have a conversation, and you better have the courage to communicate and to when that go for no moment hits and that person says, "You know, I don't know. I don't know if we should work together. I don't know if now is the right time." That's your go for no moment. Will you be able to help nudge them off the fence of indecision and say, "Hey, I understand. Here's why I would do it. Here's why I recommend, taking a chance and doing it now." Well, that requires courage. That requires you to go for no, and it's a big issue. Um, we have job security. That's all I'm saying.
And social skills were bad enough 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago as it was. Now, right, with social media being the proxy for having true social skills, um, and what 10 years from now, we won't even have to do social media. We'll just have our robot, our
The AI agent.
our agent, handle all of this. It is going to swing back another direction. The people who are going to get the business are going to be the ones who have social skills, who will reach out in person. This whole idea that
Talk about
all
differentiation.
yeah, all things being equal, people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, I don't know anybody who gets known, liked, or trusted, through an email. Yeah, it just, it's
Doesn't
spam.
happen.
Spam does not make the connection. And so the selling skills, Andrew just said, we've got some job security here, as do you. Uh, this ability to reach out and talk to people, human to human, is going to become very, very valuable. And so, go for no is going to be very important there.
As a young person, what I've genuinely found is that it is easier to hide. It is harder to press send. It's difficult. Only in the sense that I think 25 years ago there were less ways to receive rejection as consistently as we do in today's world. We have emails, Slack messages, Teams, we've got Google Message, we've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And if you're posting something and not that many people like it, it feels like rejection. If you have the LinkedIn post, LinkedIn comes along, you send LinkedIn messages and no one replies to you, that feels like rejection. Like, these are subtle things that people go through every single day. And so picking up the phone or having that real conversation becomes hindered by the overexposure to rejection. So we're more resistant to experiencing it because it's surrounding us a bit more. But you're right, our brains just haven't caught up to the technology. I mean, it takes millions of years for evolution, not 25 years. We're not
Right.
changing as quickly as, and our technology is outpacing our evolution. But I think that one of the ways that you have really shown in this new book, how to overcome this, how to really start leveraging your life in a way that gives you the results that you want, or helps you find out that you're going in the wrong direction because you are receiving enough no's to say, I need to change course, is that when Cassidy is dealing with all of this, she felt very much like someone that I could relate to. And that was a really, really intriguing part of this book that and no offense to the first book, but I didn't get this in the first book, but I
Mhm.
felt that Cassidy was someone that I could relate to because she was someone who should have had it all figured out at a certain age. So how did you approach writing her character, and what did you hope readers would take away from her experience? I know you're maybe speaking to a different audience. So what is it that you were hoping that they would read from her character?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, we did really wanna speak to a younger generation, who's out there, and I feel like we kinda covered it because if we've got the people who are in their 50s and 60s who have their own Cassidy in their life, right? They can kinda see it from her perspective, and we've all been there, right? We all haven't necessarily been older, but we've all been we've all
Right.
been younger, and so that relatability, I'm glad you said that, is really important to us. It was important in the first book. We really wanted people to see themselves in the characters so that they could relate. And, Go for No, both of these books, because they're fables, the messages are all embedded in the story.
Hmm.
We try to embed and in the dialogue. I mean, that's where the message comes through. So it's sometimes not as, I think, hit you over the head, uh, explicit in terms of like, "Oh, yeah, the book said you must do these 9 things. This is what leads to success." We embed those lessons and let the reader kind of ferret out for themselves, like, what they took away. So you saying, "Wow, she was relatable," is great. We also wanted the Eric character, her father, to also be relatable in that what happened with him was he had a lot of success. He and I hear from these people a lot, Jeb, a lot. He had a lot of success. He was kinda sitting on his laurels, like, 25 years, I became an award-winning salesperson, I wrote books, I did this, and now he's got this dream, and he's gotten kinda complacent, and he's gotten kind of like, "Wow, I have to actually go out and start asking for things again. This is." He doesn't really, he's afraid of failure now,
Yeah.
whereas 25 years ago when he was younger and hungrier, it was like, "Yeah, I can fail my way to success," and now it's like, wow, it's kinda scary. So, that's how we painted both of them. We painted him with the kind of that complacency, what happens when you do get comfortable,
Hmm.
and failure isn't as exciting when you are in your 50s and 60s. It's actually gets a lot
When
scarier.
you have something to lose.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you exactly, you have something to lose, not as much fun, and so we wanted to revisit that for Eric, and then for Cassidy, it was really fun, especially for me, because I did a lot of her dialogue and I just said, "Okay, what were my thoughts back then? How was I, how did I see things?" And we wanted her to be very relatable in that she's the voice of, "I can't do this. This is ridiculous." We have a scene where Eric's trying to teach her how to disqualify quickly. And I have to tell you, even that scene
Hmm.
is pretty old school.
Yeah.
We literally have him open up a Yellow Pages and he's like, "Let's just call and just ask these 3 questions and disqualify." And there are certain salespeople, there's certain processes that lend themselves that way. And there's certain processes that don't, that require a lot more finesse,
Mm.
appointment setting, discovery, lots of meetings, right? Complex sales, where you can't operate that way. So hopefully, and I know I'm kind of going off onto left field here. I'm coming back, I promise. Um, hopefully people also are able to take the lessons and apply them to how they go for no. So if you're not selling, if you're not more of a transactional salesperson, hopefully the lesson you walk away with is, well, how can I apply go for no to what I do?
Mm.
Yeah, and one of the challenges with writing a book like this, and you mentioned, a couple hundred pages. Well, a couple hundred are both books combined. I mean, it was
Sure.
first book
I
was
got a
80
couple
pages.
hundred out because I was trying to feel it. I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I didn't want to insult you and say,
No,
"Oh,
no,
it was
no,
only
no.
15 pages," but it's a thin. I
It's a
mean, you can see
booklet.
it on camera. It's a thin book, but it packs so much into it. So yeah, a
Yeah,
couple
well,
hundred pages for both books.
yeah, it's funny because, the 80 pages, and then we wrote a book called When They Say No. Combined, those 3 books are equal to about the size of the book your dad puts out every year. Okay, so
Yes.
but we have a different, we just have a different goal
Mm.
when we write a book. We're trying to create more of an emotional aha, right, than it is the training. We could have written 80 pages. You could write 200 pages on just handling the price objection. So
Mhm.
it's not like we
And I know a book. It's called Objections. And by the way,
yeah,
do you know the opening quote in Objections
no.
is mine?
Oh,
It is.
It is. And I
that's
go
funny.
I go to the bookstore sometimes and I open it up and I'm like, I'm
I
in this
I'm
book.
I made it.
Yes, me.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the challenge with writing this book, I know you packed
yeah.
80 pages. So what is when you're thinking about these characters and shaping their narrative and teaching the lesson, Richard, for you, I don't want to say that Eric was your voice and Cassidy was your voice, but that might be the case when you're speaking with these people's voices who are maybe you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and getting into their minds and trying to speak from that place. How do you put that into a succinct and understandable narrative that makes sense for your readers?
Yeah, well, you're going to find this interesting. Eric in the book is actually my dad's voice.
Mm.
That is my dad from 45 years ago. Cassidy is me. I mean, I'm fundamentally,
Are you Cassidy?
yeah,
'Cause I'm Cassidy too.
yeah. Well, I
I'm
know, but
Cassidy too.
Yeah.
Wait, who's
I'm,
Cassidy?
Who's Cassidy?
yes,
Yeah.
I'm the older, not quite as attractive Cassidy. Okay, um, but that was my dad fundamentally said to me when I went back to my dad and said, I can't sell. My dad said, what do you mean? It's easy. Come on, let's make some calls together. And I watched my dad make a couple phone calls and, he got a couple orders and he said, that's selling, and sent me back down to my office. Like I was supposed to be motivated by watching him be a sales natural and do something that I was unable, of doing.
Mm.
And so Cassidy really is Eric is just, he's like, come on, Cass, it's not that hard. You can do this. And she's like, you don't understand. I don't have the wiring that you have. I don't
Oh.
have the experiences you have. I'm just not wired the same way. You're a sales natural, Dad. I am not a sales natural. So quit making it sound easy, because every time you say it's easy, all that does is demotivate me.
Mhm.
It just makes me feel defective. And so that was kind of, a big part of the goal of the book was to make people feel normal when they experience, some fear of failure and rejection. Instead of trying to make people feel dumb and defective, we wanted people to read the book and go like, "Oh, that's me. Wow, I feel just like that." And then maybe we can bring them along on a ride to where we're able to, to to change their overall feeling. But I will also tell you this, and this is a little embarrassing too. Two things that are embarrassing.
Oh, you got
One,
two of them. Okay.
yeah, you ready? Well, one, the first book was 80 pages, and you know why it was 80 pages? Because that's all we could afford to print. We were publishing the book ourselves. The publisher charges it by the page, the printer. And so we said, we just can't make this book too big. So we consciously kept it small, in part because of that. But then we learned the other really amazing thing, which was because we had an 80-page book, people would get books all the time. They'd get books as gifts or promotional materials, or they'd buy them at a bookstore, and it'd be 250 pages, 350 pages. There was kind of a feeling by publishers that what you could charge somebody was based on the page count.
Mm.
You couldn't get $25 for a hardcover book if you did an 80-page book. So they forced you into a 250 or 300-page book. When we gave people the 80-page book, we cut in line. Somebody would have a stack of 10 books, and they go like, what am I going to read next? And I go like, I'll read the short one, right? And so they would grab our book out of the stack And that let us kind of get, and so we learned something very important that, sales are great. The number of books you've sold, that's wonderful. The money is made from the sales, but consumption, how many people consume your material is where attitudes are changed and people are changed and they're made better. So from that day on, when we discovered that, every book we've done has been short. We've never done a book over 100 pages.
I will say this though, the first draft he gave me was like 130 pages, and I went back to him with so many pages were just X'd out, just red X's, because he went into so much detail about golf and and how bad the like Strawberry Creek, the course that Eric wants to own and fix up. So much detail. I'm like, Richard, you went on for a page about how bad the course looks. We get it. We got to get rid of this stuff. Oh my gosh, it was ridiculous.
Richard, I want to read that golf book. If you have a copy of that, just send it over my way, okay? It's a really cool narrative in that as Cassidy, I see myself as Cassidy. I grew up in this world, and I have the father who is a natural salesperson. I mean, he's the sales guy with all the sales books. It's a position that Richard. When you walked through your keynote a few years ago, and I watched you talked about your dad with the binder and how he just knew everything about everybody. And I am just not that guy. Like, I am not that person. I have a hard time with it. And I'm not as natural as the person that I want to emulate. And, he's the same way. He goes, we just do it. Just, if we just get on the phones and we just start talking to people, we're going to make sales, and you just do this and you just do that and just do. Very like, he's like a Nike commercial. He walks around and just do it. And, I have that struggle of, I feel more demoralized when he shows me how to do it because he's so good at it. And why am I just not that good at it? And I read this book, the sequel, and it clicked. I thought, oh, that's me. I felt less alone in the world. And I think there's a lot of sellers. They don't have the father or the that figure in their life, but they do walk into the office and they see the top sales rep and they're making all the money and they're struggling to get by with their rent. They're struggling to get by with their paycheck because they're only making a few sales a month and they're thinking they might get fired. That's a very different end of the spectrum. And we typically leave them alone because they're just going to leave. Like, we don't want them in our organization. And I think what you both illustrated in this interview and with your book is that don't leave those people behind. They're not defective. They just need to be taught differently, and they can have the same results if they just have the right coaching. And so if we're talking to leaders in the sales space, people who are looking at having this philosophy as a cornerstone of their sales team, maybe they've got the first book, but maybe they only hear this interview and they want to get the second book. Can they read the sequel without the first? And how do those two books play together? They're 80 pages each, so I'm gonna up front just buy them both. But if you had to choose, one of them, how should people go about consuming this content?
Rich is pointing to me, and this is a profound question, which I have no answer to. But, and I should, since we're going to be doing more of these interviews. Yeah, I mean, I guess the reality is if I had to choose, I would want someone to read Go for No, the original, because I feel like understanding that is the cornerstone of the philosophy that's in that book.
Mm.
That said, if you haven't read the book and you just started with the sequel, you could completely get through the sequel and never have to worry about hearing no, because we did sprinkle enough in there that people would kind of understand what Go for No means and what it's about.
Yeah, imagine two friends that are on their way to go see John Wick 2, right? And the one friend says, "I didn't see John Wick 1," and the other friend says, "They killed his dog." Okay, now you're up to date.
Have you seen
really
an action
mad.
movie
He's
before?
really mad.
And John Wick 2, he's still angry.
He's still angry.
So you can kind of pick up the story pretty easily. We do a brief recap, right? In the beginning, so they can do the sequel, but I think it is better to read the first book first and the second book because there is a little bit of an evolution there that happens.
Perfect. Get both. Go for No. Yes is the destination. No is how you get there. And then Go for No, the sequel. The no's are still angry. And
Yes,
and
Still angry.
those are incredible. So I guess the last question is, when you read the sequel, if you're going to have someone walk away with one big idea that they're going to take action on for either of you, what would that be?
Well, mine is execute on your go for no moments when that moment arises, and you know it's a go for no moment because it's the moment you start talking yourself out of it. That is the clear sign it's a moment. Then you just got to go for it, like you
Mm.
did with Condoleezza Rice. I love that story.
Yeah, mine would be the thing that you brought up earlier when you mentioned, don't be you. We recognize that both of our books only scratch the surface of a topic, right? And we aren't doing that to try to lure people into buying our other products. It's just there's only so much you can accomplish in 80 pages. So we tell a story that gives you a feeling and gives you some understanding. The main message behind this book is the don't be you message. It's just quit telling yourself that you're not good at this. Quit telling yourself that you're never going to be good at this. Understand that you can't, you cannot master a complex skill like selling in a very short period of time with a half-assed effort. You're not gonna do that. And I'll just tell you this: there's a book called The 5 Great Rules of Selling, and in the book, this kid gets a job working for a company selling, and 2 weeks later, this man goes to him and says, "How's the job going?" And he says, "Oh, I quit." He goes, "I don't like selling. I'm sorry I ever learned it." Okay, like somehow in 2 weeks you could learn selling. And we wanted there to be a certain amount of tenacity involved in this
Mm.
second book, that
Mm.
you can overcome this hump if you stick with it and if you have the right attitude.
Incredible pieces of work. Go for No, get the second book, the sequel, The Empire Strikes Back. And Andrea and Richard, where can people find this book? Where can they learn more about you? And where can they learn more about Go for No?
Thanks, Jeb. This was, first of all, I just have to say this was so much fun. Love talking to
Yeah.
you. Yeah, they can come to goforno.com and learn about Go for No. Take the No Quotient quiz, which is where I recommend everybody starts, because before you do anything, figure out where you are mentally in your mindset about failure, rejection, hearing the word no. So take the quiz. That's what we recommend. But you can grab the books on Amazon.
Right. And also, I'd like to mention that we have a number of courses inside Sales Gravy University. And so
That's right. We have our courses. Somebody took recently and said that he absolutely loved it, which was I
I
was really excited.
I am so excited that you are both on Sales Gravy University. If quick ad for Sales Gravy University, go take these courses. They're Go for No. You can use the code FREECOURSE and take one of them for free, but the rest of them you got to pay for. So learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com. Salesgravy.com // resources if you wanted some other resources as well. But Go for No is an incredible book. Go check out the sequel. Andrea, Richard, thank you so much for being on the Sales Gravy podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you. We loved it. We love being here.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to click like and subscribe so you never miss a single video. And if you want more sales training content, go to learn.salesgravy.com.